Welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. A couple of days ago I asked for questions in a kind of ask me anything I'll probably answer kind of way, and I've been so gratified that so many of you responded, and it's been great. A little bit terrified so many of you responded and asked me so many questions, which when I sort of compiled them I thought it's going to take me hours to respond and I'm not sure what to do. So what I've tried to do now, or what I've done, is taken a lot of the questions, bunch them together into two bundles. There's the stuff about me and my watch collecting journey in the channel, and then there's more general stuff about watches and the watch industry. I'm going to separate those and do them in two different videos. The first one about me and my watch collecting, I'll probably make as a sort of stick at the top, and that way if I do one of these again in a couple of months I don't have to keep answering the same questions, which I don't mind, because who am I to care about talking about myself, but you, the loyal viewers, might get a bit tired of after we do this a couple of times. So with that said, what I'm going to talk about today are quick and dirty answers to the questions that you asked me about me, who I am, what I do, how I got into watches, what watches mean to me, and where I think I might go with the channel. So with that done, who am I? I'm Peter McConville, 53 years old, married, 3 grown-up kids, had my first grandchild, another daughter, earlier this year. Yes, earlier this year. So that's it. 2 cats, 1 dog. What else do you want to know? You want to know my job. Okay. I'm an engineering officer in the Royal Australian Air Force. I have an Bachelor of Aeronautical Engineering. I've been in the Air Force for ballparky 30 something years. That means I've had somewhere between 10 and 15 jobs. Sometimes had multiple jobs within a posting. I've been a senior engineering officer looking after the maintenance on large transport and tanker aircraft. I've run a certification program for another large aircraft. I've been the chief engineer of an aircraft. Had a number of jobs in and around aircraft safety and certification, and right now I run a section that looks after all the oversight and assurance of all initial certification and changes to the design of Australian military aircraft. That's what I do. What does that mean? I spend a lot of time looking at how organisations work, both in terms of how they meet the regulations, but also issues like safety culture and the context within which they make decisions. I spend very, very little time actually looking at maths, and I spend an awful lot of time considering human behaviour and organisational behaviours under periods of a lot of stress and when they're trying to solve very difficult technical problems. And it's that kind of philosophical, cultural, psychosocial things that I kind of bring to my watch channel, backed by an understanding of technical issues. So I don't really have a primary technical job anymore, and my primary look at watches isn't really technical. It's more about that whole psychosocial cultural thing, but I certainly have a solid grounding in mechanics, and so I certainly get what we're doing in terms of case construction and movement design and stuff like that. So that's really me and where I come from a work point of view. Some of you have asked questions about what are my interests other than watches. Well, there's primarily 2 others these days. I do a lot of photography, mostly out there in the street, and travel stuff, which is a lazy, probably more accurately to say, I'm a lazy photographer who doesn't really like using artificial light a lot and isn't really into the hardcore technical stuff. So I'm amazed by those people who are good at it. And whenever I try and do product shots of watches, I'm just all thumbs. It's really difficult for me. I'm also, as far as sports go, I like to do triathlon. Now, I haven't been able to do that for about a year. I got sick last year. I'm just beginning to get back into it. I've reoriented my camera because I must admit, it was always a bit messy. There used to be this stuff in the background. That was, I think, some of my early ones, I had a bike in the way, and more recent ones, there was a wetsuit and stuff hanging behind me. Moved it around now. the wetsuit and the bikes are still there, but you just can't see them anymore. As I said, I got sick and I haven't been able to do that for a while. I've got my diagnosis now. It's nothing serious, but it's just a disease which led to me putting on 20 kilos, which made everything pretty hard. Got a lot of weight to lose. I've started training. Hopefully I'll be back in doing triathlons at the end of this year and aiming to go long next year if I can. What else was there that you wanted to know about me? Okay, Sagittarius was my star sign, and under no circumstances should a pineapple ever be on a pizza. I think the most questions, though, were more about me and watches. So the first question I'm going to tackle was, what was my first really serious watch? My first really serious watch was a little quartz Citizen Diver, which I picked up, which I got in 1989. It was in fact a graduation gift from university from my parents. It's engraved on the back saying congratulations, well done, looking forward to a long career. I've used that for literally decades. That was kind of my only watch. I've used it actually diving. It's traveled the world with me. It is probably the first watch that was truly mine, and it's the watch which I've had the longest. Someone asked me, if there was a bushfire bearing down, what would be the watch I'd take with me? It would be that watch. But in a close run thing, I've also got a Charmex chrono that my daughter bought for me as a present with her first real paycheck when she graduated from uni and got her first real job. I think if I could fit two, it would be those two. The next question that some people asked was, what was the watch that kind of got me into collecting? That would be my Frederic Constant Classic GMT. I was coming up to my 50th birthday. Like a lot of people approaching that milestone, I was thinking about getting something special. A watch was the obvious one. I started doing the research on what I wanted to do for watches. And this came at an interesting time when I'd been on a couple of years before, I'd been on a posting to the United States. During that time, it wasn't feasible for me to pay long-term storage on multiple cars that I had previously worked on. So I had a road-going Lancia Beta that was like halfway to a rally car. I had another Lancia Beta coupe that I was building to become a Group 4 rally replica, and I also had a Fiat 124 that was in the process of becoming a road car. It was just about to make it. Then I got posted overseas. They all went into storage, and together it was going to cost me literally tens of thousands of dollars a year just to have these three cars in storage. They went, I auctioned them off, got them sold, and never really got back into it. So at the time when I was looking at watches and researching what to do in terms of my 50th, I kind of was ripe for a new thing. I was ripe for a new hobby, and watches just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I went down that rabbit hole fast. What I would say is when I went down that rabbit hole, I went down a very traditional kind of media route. Well, traditional in a 20th century kind of way. So lots of like normal plain websites, a blog to watch I went to a lot. And a lot of the other kind of, I'll call mainstream media style sites. So I didn't go into a lot of the enthusiast sites. I didn't really find them. I don't know why, but I just didn't. I also just bought some plain old everyday magazines. One of the interesting things is I think that set me up to be a little bit different, because paid regular mainstream magazines, mainstream medias, they'll talk about whoever pays advertising. And so they have a much wider cross section. They talk about a much wider variety of brands than the enthusiasts do. The enthusiasts tend to be quite locked into just those brands which they're enthusiastic about. And they won't really look at brands that they're not interested in. And that became really interesting, because what it meant was when I did discover the enthusiast side, I was really taken aback by how narrow it seemed their coverage and their discussions was. But I'll get onto that in a second. So having bought my first watch, having been sort of primed and started thinking about buying watches, I obviously went down the rabbit hole that virtually all of us do about wanting to know more. I immediately discovered Seiko divers and started buying some of those. So I think I got a Turtle and a Samurai quite quickly. Started picking up some other odds and sods and Orient along the way. And so it was accumulating watches. But I think the thing that really sparked it was I was out on a walk. I work in the CBD of Melbourne, and there's a really good watch community of watch stores there. I have this walk I do sort of down Collins Street, then swing back and go back through a bunch of watch shops. And I just stumbled upon a little store that, as it turns out, has now gone out of business, selling Alpinas, a brand I'd never heard of before, and it had this Alpina Star Timer pilot's watch, a watch I immediately fell in love with. I was about to go away on a trip, so I had a pocket full of allowances to go with me, so I was able to just pay cash, walk away with it, and that really got me thinking, hang on, there's something more than just Seiko divers and Amazon specials. I can get involved in this more seriously. And then after I got comfortable with that, again, I'm doing my walk, and then I walked past another shop, the Swiss Emporium, stuck my head in. Now, they're an Oris dealer in Melbourne. Chat, look down, and there's this stunning, gorgeous, really funky little watch that I'd never seen before. It turns out it's the Doval, the Oris Diver 65 with the Doval, so the grey blue. And it was gorgeous, and I'd never heard of it before. I didn't know anything much about Oris, didn't know anything at all about this watch. Was it real? Was it fake? Was it a toy? What was it? So spoke to the guys. They were very nice. They said they'd put the watch on hold for me. I went home and massively started researching it. Two things happened that night. One is I learned a lot about that watch, went back to the next day, bought it. And the second thing was, that watch is a super darling of the YouTube set. And when I searched for that, suddenly 1,000 YouTube sites came up. And that, I think, was the moment where I discovered that there is, in fact, this enormous online community in YouTube. And that's also when I discovered, as I said before, the kind of what I felt was a sort of a narrow focus on a very limited number of brands. I mean, I'd been sort of making my list of brands I was interested in from a catalogue. So here I was, kind of reading this thing, making lists of literally, I think there's 200 brands in there and hundreds of different kinds of watch. And yet, if I looked on YouTube, maybe 20 different brands got an airing. And that's when I got the idea of maybe there was a place for my voice. Maybe there was a place to talk about something else. And then, having thought about maybe I'll do a channel, maybe I'll do a couple of videos and talk about my ideas, that made me start thinking. Actually, that just made me start thinking. And that made me start thinking really hard about, well, hang on, what would I say? And if I had to say something, what would I think? And if I had to think something, what would that be? And that's the first time I started thinking seriously about the watches I had and I bought, and what were the themes that were joining them together. And I realized that over the previous maybe year and a half, 2 years, I'd accumulated a lot of watches, but I wasn't that discriminating. There was a lot of dross in there. There was a lot of stuff I liked, but I wasn't really committed to. And that's when I started thinking very hard about not accumulating watches anymore, but actually collecting watches. And if you've seen my the rules for collecting video, that's where it was during that time that I started coming up with sort of those rules about what do I want to do. And one of the things that I did work out about myself is that I'm not one of these 3 watch collection kind of guys. My collection is going to be big. My accumulated pile of watches is more than I feel comfortable talking about. Let's just say it's at least 40 or so watches. Not massive value, but it's more watches than I really should have. And there's probably a great chunk of them that don't fit within the collection that I would like to have. So I'm transitioning between having an accumulation of watches and a collection of watches, which really brings me to the next question that many of you raised, which is, what is my collection of watches and what else do I do? A lot of you, it's obvious I like my Alpinas, but what else is there? So obviously the Alpinas, when I sat down and counted them, turns out I've got 12. 3 of them are current models, and I've got 9 vintage ones. I've also got a lot of Fortis watches. I think I've got 3 Fortis watches. I've got 3 Breitling watches. I've got, hang on a sec, I'll just check my notes. Got 2 Edox watches. And I think you can see a pattern forming in those. There's a lot of other onesies and twosies, but they're the ones I kind of hone in on. And the onesies and twosies, I think are kind of watches I kind of liked but didn't love. And then when I look outside of those watches into like the rest of the brand, there's not a lot there for me. Those watches I just mentioned, one of the reasons I have multiples of them is because when I look at the other watches in their collection, there's lots of other things I'm interested in. And so whilst I talk a lot about not getting too wrapped up in brands, the truth is brands have themes. Often those themes will resonate with what you like, and so I think it's only natural that you do slot into having some brands you have an affinity for. And so the brands I see myself collecting are the ones I've mentioned: Breitling, Edox, Fortis, Alpina. What else was there? I'll probably keep collecting Seiko divers, but not a lot of other Seikos. But there's some other brands which are definitely on my list. They are things I like, and so I'm going to be I am currently saving for a particular Bell & Ross, and after that there's another one on the list. There's at least 2 Ulysses Nardin watches which I really want, and there is any number of JLC watches I want. So that's kind of the collection I'm looking at building. Note, as I said, I'm not a 3 watch collection kind of guy. My collection will keep growing until I can't afford to buy watches anymore. I don't put a cap on it. It'll be what it will be. Some of you asked about my cheapest watch and my most expensive watch. And sort of the range I live in. My cheapest watch is a Vostok Komandersky. I think I paid about $50 for it. My most expensive watch is a watch that is currently winging its way to me. So I bought it, but I haven't reviewed it. You haven't seen it on Instagram or anything, but I bought myself a new Breitling Super Ocean. There's a particular reason I bought that one. I would normally never buy a watch brand new. There's a reason why I did buy that one, but I'm not going to go into it now. I'll talk about it when it arrives. A question that one of the viewers asked me was, what should people aim for? Lots of cheaper watches, or save up and save up and save up and go for the Grail watch. As you can see from the discussion I just had, that's a live problem for me. I can't help you with that. I can't tell you what the right answer is. I don't think there is a right answer. What I think I can say is, here's an approach to take to solve the problem. And it's an approach I came to because I was out of control in that problem. And that is, design your collection before you choose your watches. So before you start buying watches, design the collection, know all the watches that you want to buy at some point. And then it stops being a question of should I buy this watch, and rather it narrows down and becomes a bit simpler to should I buy this watch now. And when it's just a matter of timing, a lot of the problems start to resolve themselves. There's actually some more rules around that. There's always rules around these things. That's actually a video I've got coming up. So far I've done a sort of what the rules of watch collecting are, how then from that, how you develop the list of watches you want. The next video is how do you make choices on which watch you will buy off that list. But as I said, whole video on that coming. Going back to my engineering stuff, someone asked me the question of what watch, as an engineer, what watch movement excites me? That's a difficult question because, as I said, as an engineer, I'm not that technical anymore. I suppose I'd say that was it the Vacheron Constantin that came out this Basel World with the kind of dual speed movement where you could put it into a slow beat mode so your perpetual calendar wouldn't screw up. That to me was A, really brilliant, and B, I was hard to believe no one had thought of that before. So I found that really interesting. I'm also a huge Bulgari fan. I love the new automatic chrono GMT movement. Now that's all fairly funky, but what I really like is the peripheral rotor on that. So the automatic wind-up, we all know the great big fat rotors that you see that cover half the movement. Then there's reasonably common, you get the little micro rotors which open up some of the movement height, make it all a bit simpler. That's nice. But I think the piece de resistance, the thing I really like, is the peripheral rotor, where the rotor just becomes a ring around the entire movement. That was very funky. I love how they do that. If I can answer that question from a different perspective, and not as an engineer which movement excites me, but rather as a watch fan, as a watch collector, which movement excites me, that's much easier for me to answer, and I can give you an absolute strict answer to that, and that is clearly the ETA 2824. That movement is, I'd probably refer it or liken it to the Cosworth DFV Formula One engine of the late 60s and early 70s. What I mean there is that engine, that Cosworth V8 engine, was light. It was actually, in a way, it was kind of the unicorn. It defied the normal laws. It was light, cheap, and powerful and reliable. You're normally not supposed to be able to do all of that, but this thing did. And it was available to everyone. It was a customer engine anyone could afford to buy. And that engine was responsible for the golden age of Formula One. Through those late 60s through to like the mid 70s, that was the time when Formula One was great. It was exciting. It was close. It was thrilling. On any given weekend, you never knew who was going to be on the podium. It was a customer engine which on one level maybe took away some of the technical interest for the aficionado, but on another level made the sport fascinating. And that's where I really see the 2824. For the technical aficionado, perhaps it's a bit boring, perhaps it's a bit pedestrian, but that movement is responsible for 90% of the best watches that we see. Close your eyes and imagine what our watch community would look like if every watch that used a movement based on the 2824 vanished and we couldn't use it anymore. How boring, how terrible would our hobby be? That's why I love that movement. Moving from things I love to things I'm not so keen on. Someone asked me what my least favorite complication is. That's a no-brainer for me, and if anyone's seen my stuff before, you'll know it's a moon phase. Nothing wrong with it. There's nothing. It's just not me. It's not my style. It's too dressy, too prissy, too fussy. Some comments that said, I'm not really a moon phase kind of guy. I'm more a salt and vinegar chips kind of guy. Yeah, it's probably true. So that's all the watch stuff. Now, how about the channel and me as a presenter? The question was, how do I think I'm different to other commentators? I'll look at that in terms of what value do I bring, and as opposed to all the others. I think there's three things. One, I take a much wider view. I tend to look, although to be honest, it has got a lot better, but I will tend to look outside of the swim lanes that some other people will look at. I think where it gets more interesting is I'll tend to take a deeper view. I will tend not to look just at the watch, but I look at the watch as it is worn and understood by real life people. So I won't just look at the watch and say, because it's gold, it's luxury, because it's this, it's that. But instead say, what does the watch mean to the people who are wearing it? What does that mean in terms of the philosophy of the watch and the psychology of the person wearing it and the people that are watching them wear it? I think that's really much more interesting. That's why if you watch my videos, I'll talk a lot more about the authenticity of watches, and I'll talk about things like the watch and the social position of a watch. And so that's where I'll say I'll look deeper into watches as opposed to just the watch as a mechanical thing in isolation from the person wearing it. And the final thing is I'll tend to look at watches longer. I'll tend to look at what watch brands and what watches mean, not today or in the next quarter or the next year, but what does a watch and what does a watch release mean over a 5-year period, a 10-year period. I suppose I'll contrast the way I look at a couple of issues that have come out lately compared to a lot of other people. So a lot of people, for example, with the what I'm going to call the new Omega Ultra series, there's a lot of people who are looking at the Ultra Deep saying, terrible thing, we can't get it in, you can't get it, it's not, you can't buy it, there's no real thing, maybe one day there'll be a tech thing, but nothing else. A couple of months later, we see the Ultralight, and the Ultralight comes out and it's like $48,000 and it's not going to be available for anyone, blah, blah, blah. And there's lots of who's going to buy one of these things. Very few other commenters have actually, noticed the word Ultra turning up in both of them, thought to themselves, what would happen if Omega put out another Ultra series watch in 6 months' time? What if they put out another Ultra series watch 2 years from now? What would it mean to Omega if they, over an extended period of time, laid claim to we are the ultra performance watch in this category? What does that mean? Maybe it doesn't matter if no one buys the, maybe it doesn't matter if the Ultra Deep never really comes into being. But if the word ultra, if the idea of ultimate performance over a half a decade or a decade becomes attached to Omega, what does that mean? What does that mean for Rolex? What does that mean for other people? That's what I mean by saying I'll tend to look at things over a longer period, and not be so fussed about whether I think this watch is going to shift quarterly sales numbers for this fiscal year. Okay, so I've been talking a lot and I've left the most difficult, the most interesting question to last, and it's one I don't really still know how to answer, but I'm going to give it a try. I was asked, where did I think I would see my passion for watches taking me? And I've really been thinking about this quite hard, and I'm still not sure. But an answer is beginning to form. Broadly, I'm at a stage in my life where I'm beginning to think, this is the stepping stone as I start to transition from full-time work. What you should take out of that is I'm intending to take this seriously. I'm in this for the long haul, and I'm going to try and build this slowly and steadily and in a really sustainable manner. And so I'm going to work really hard on trying to get some foundations laid. And so finishing on that kind of not downbeat, but some more sort of serious note, that's it. I hope I've answered as many questions as I can about me and what I'm doing and how I got here. I won't do another one of these for some time. So what I'll do is I'll wrap this one up, make it as sticky, put it up there. If people have got similar questions, we'll refer to it. Maybe in a little while we'll come back and I'll update it. What I will do is do a more contemporary one about the watch industry and watches probably tomorrow. So I'll knock these over quite quickly. So if your questions were in that space, don't panic. I haven't ignored you. I will answer those tomorrow. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. Actually, it hasn't. I've been Pete McConville. This has been the Pete McConville Talking About Pete McConville show. If you hang on, a little card will come up that's got all of my contact details and stuff. So yeah, get in contact with me. I love interacting. I love trying to build a little community in our comments section. So yeah, thanks very much. Bye.